So let's just think about this for a second. How on earth do you govern a nation of over 1 billion people? I mean, we're talking about a place with almost unimaginable complexity. Well, today, we're going to dive right into the blueprint of the world's largest democracy. And really, that's the big question, right? How do you take a population that's more diverse than entire continents and forge a single functioning democracy out of it? It's honestly one of the greatest political experiments in all of human history. You see, India isn't just one culture, not even close. It's a land with hundreds of distinct languages, cuisines that change every few miles, and just about every major faith on earth. People talk about a melting pot, but that's not quite right. It's more like a giant, beautiful mosaic where every single piece keeps its own unique shape and color. But here's the thing. All that incredible diversity exists right alongside some really deep historical divisions. We're talking about massive social and economic divides, things like the caste system, huge gaps between rich and poor that have been baked into society for centuries. So the challenge wasn't just, hey, how do we manage all this diversity? It was, how do we actively fix these historical injustices? Okay, to really get a picture of this, let's just look at 2 states. Up in the north, you've got Ladakh. It's this high-altitude, mountainous desert often called Little Tibet. Then you go all the way to the south to coastal Kerala, a total hub of the ancient spice trade with centuries of influence from Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traders. I mean, these are 2 parts of the same country, but they feel like they're worlds apart. So you're probably asking, how in the world do you hold all of that together? Well, India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, had a really interesting take on this. He said, look, India's unity isn't something forced on it from the outside. It's something deeper. It's this organic, built-in tolerance that doesn't just put up with diversity, it actually encourages it. And that very idea, it became the philosophical bedrock for the whole country. And that philosophy got turned into a blueprint, the Constitution of India. Now, this thing is way more than just a rulebook. It's this incredibly ambitious, audacious plan to build one unified nation out of all that mind-boggling diversity. So let's get into it. Let's see how it actually works. Right, so the people writing the Constitution didn't just start with a blank page. They had a mission statement, something called the Objectives Resolution. Think of it as the summary of everything the freedom struggle was about. And this meant that core ideas, we're talking liberty, equality, fraternity, and justice, were basically woven into the very fabric of the Constitution right from the get-go. But, and this is so important, the framers were also total realists. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was the main architect of the Constitution, he gave this really powerful warning. He basically said, hang on a second, we're about to have a country where everyone gets one vote, political equality. But at the same time, we have these massive social and economic inequalities. That's a huge contradiction. He knew you couldn't have one without the other for long. The whole thing could just fall apart. And that warning, man, it really shaped one of the most innovative and, let's be honest, controversial parts of the Indian Constitution. It's this direct attempt to actually engineer equality in a society that for centuries was defined by hierarchy. So first, let's just be super clear on what the goal was. In the Constitution, equality means making sure that every single person has the same rights and the same opportunities to build their skills and chase their dreams. It's all about creating a level playing field. Okay, and to do this, the Constitution makes this really critical distinction. It says, look, there are natural inequalities. Some people are born better at math, some are born faster runners. You can't really change that. But then there are socially produced inequalities. These are the barriers that society builds based on things like your caste or your religion. And the Constitution says those barriers, the man-made ones, not only can be taken down, they must be taken down. Now here comes the really radical idea, and it's a bit of a mind bender. To fix socially created inequality, the solution isn't always to treat everyone exactly the same. In fact, sometimes you have to do the opposite. To truly level that playing field, you might actually need to give some people a bit of a boost, a leg up, to help them overcome centuries of disadvantage. And this is where we get to the policy of reservations, which is basically India's form of affirmative action. It's a pretty straightforward 3-step process. Step 1, the government identifies the specific groups that have been historically marginalized. Step 2, a certain percentage of government jobs and spots in universities are then reserved just for them. And step 3, the whole point of this is to empower these communities and finally create some real, genuine equality of opportunity. Of course, there has to be a balance, right? So to keep things in check, India's Supreme Court has generally capped the total number of reserved spots at 50%. The idea here is to make sure that while you're working to fix historical wrongs, you don't completely throw out the idea of merit-based selection. Now, as you can probably imagine, a policy like this isn't just decided once and then everyone agrees. No way. It's part of a constant, dynamic, and often really, really heated democratic debate. And a perfect example of this blew up in the 1990s with something called the Mandal Commission. It recommended extending these reservations to a whole new group of people, the other backward classes. And wow, did that ignite one of the most intense, divisive, and widespread political debates in modern Indian history. And this debate was fierce. On one side, you had people saying this is absolutely necessary. It's the only way to tackle deep-seated inequality and make sure everyone gets a fair shot. But on the other side, people were really worried. They said this could just make caste identity a permanent thing, that it could damage national unity, and that it wasn't fair to qualified people from other communities. This is exactly what democracy looks like in action. It's messy, it's loud, but it's how you work through these huge, fundamental disagreements. And this kind of tension, it's not just about social policy. It's actually built right into the structure of the government itself. So another key piece of the puzzle is federalism, dividing power between the central government and the states. But India's version is kind of unique. It's federalism, but with a really strong central government. The center controls key things like top government officials and can even make laws on stuff that's supposed to be handled by the states. So what you get is this constant political tug of war between the states wanting more autonomy and the center wanting to maintain control. And that push and pull shapes pretty much everything. So what's the big takeaway here? I think the most important thing is to stop thinking of Indian democracy as some finished product. It's not. It's a living, breathing, constantly changing experiment. It's a work in progress. And this actually brings us to a pretty powerful and maybe surprising conclusion. All the constant criticism you hear, the protests, the public anger, you might think those are signs of failure. But actually, you could argue they're proof of success. It shows that people have gone from being subjects of a ruler to being empowered citizens who know their rights and aren't afraid to call out people in power. And at the end of the day, that's the real strength of this whole system. Democracy never promises a perfect, conflict-free society. That's impossible. What it does promise is a way to handle our differences and our conflicts peacefully. It gives a country an inbuilt way to fix its own mistakes, to learn, and to change course when it needs to. And that leaves us with one last big question for the future of this whole experiment: nationalism. That powerful feeling that helped unite India in the first place. Well, it also has the power to divide. It's a classic double-edged sword. It can build incredible loyalty, but it can also create deep hate. So how India continues to walk that tightrope, balancing unity with its incredible diversity, that remains the central defining challenge for the world's largest democracy.